The war may not end because anyone wants peace. It may end because the ledger is starting to win. That is a sentence to keep in mind this week. The missiles still matter, the front lines still matter, the speeches still matter, but the center of gravity is shifting away from the battlefield and into something less dramatic and more decisive: storage tanks. Blocked ports, collapsed currency, food inflation, displaced villages, coalition arithmetic, military manpower. This is how wars enter their final dangerous phase. Not when the guns go quiet, but when every side starts calculating what the next month will cost and realizes the answer may be worse than the enemy. Iran's latest reported proposal is the clearest sign yet. Tehran is offering a trade, reopen the Strait of Hormuz if Washington lifts the blockade and push the nuclear question to a later stage. At first glance, that sounds like Iran trying to dodge the hard issue. And it is, but it is also something more important. It is Iran admitting indirectly that the blockade has become a separate emergency from the nuclear dispute. The nuclear issue is ideological, political, historical, and tied to sovereignty. Iran can frame enrichment as dignity. It can tell its people that it is resisting foreign dictation. It can survive a long argument over inspectors, percentages, treaties, and rights. The blockade is different. The blockade touches the bloodstream of the state. It hits exports, it hits imports, it hits oil storage, it hits salaries, it hits smuggling networks. It hits the state's ability to move money through the gray zones where Iran has survived for years. That is why Tehran wants to split the file in 21. File is nuclear. The other is economic survival. Iran is trying to save the second without surrendering the first. For much of this war, Iran's calculation was simple. The Americans could bomb, the Israelis could strike, but neither side had the appetite for a full ground campaign. Air power can damage a regime, but it does not easily replace it. Iran has a large population, a hardened security structure, and decades of experience surviving pressure. So Tehran waited. It assumed Washington would get tired first. It assumed Trump wanted an exit. It assumed the longer the war dragged on, the more the cost would move against America. Then Washington changed tempo. The air war did not disappear. But the main instrument became financial pressure. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly described the strategy as the financial equivalent of kinetic activity. That phrase tells you how Washington now sees the campaign. The bomb is not the only weapon. The invoice is a weapon. The blocked tanker is a weapon. The frozen crypto wallet is a weapon. The sanction on a Chinese buyer is a weapon. The filled storage tank is a weapon. The blockade does not need a dramatic image every hour. It just needs to tighten every day. Iran is estimated to be losing hundreds of millions of dollars daily through blocked exports and imports. Its oil trade has been battered. A smuggling network tied to Emirati-front companies has been sanctioned. A major Chinese-linked customer has been targeted. Dozens of shipping firms have been hit. Hundreds of millions in Iran-linked cryptocurrency have been frozen. This is not just punishment. It is an attempt to turn time against Tehran. The Iranian economy was already weak before the war. The rial had already been crushed. Food inflation had already become unbearable. Bread and cereal prices were not just economic indicators. They were political warnings. When staple food becomes a crisis, the government does not only face a budget problem, it faces a legitimacy problem. Then came 8 weeks of internet blackout. A blackout can help the regime control information, but it also damages commerce, payments, logistics, and daily life. It protects the state from sudden protest while draining the economy the state needs in order to survive that protest. That is the contradiction of crisis rule. The tools that prevent an explosion can deepen the collapse underneath. Add the blockade, and Iran's old survival formula becomes harder. Not impossible, harder. That distinction matters. Iran is not about to collapse simply because outside analysts add up losses. Regimes like this fall when elites split, security forces stop believing, salaries stop moving, or the population decides fear no longer works. There's no proof that Iran is there. but there is proof that pressure is changing its behavior. A fully confident regime would not rush to offer Hormuz for blockade relief while asking to delay the nuclear question. That proposal is not surrender. It is movement. And movement under pressure is exactly what Washington wanted. The problem is that Washington has a clock too. If America accepts the offer, Iran may reopen Hormuz while preserving the hardest nuclear disagreement for later. That could look like Tehran pocketed economic relief without making the strategic concession Washington needs. If America rejects the offer, the blockade continues. That keeps pressure on Iran, but also keeps pressure on markets, allies, shipping routes, Gulf states, and the credibility of diplomacy. That is why Trump's language matters. He says, America has all the cards, but the strongest player can still misplay a hand if it waits too long. In diplomacy, leverage has a shelf life. It is powerful when it forces the other side into a room. It becomes dangerous when it traps both sides outside the room. Right now, Washington is trying to prove Iran needs a deal more than America does. Iran is trying to prove the opposite, and the region is paying for the argument. Lebanon shows what happens when the bill for a regional war lands on a country that did not control the original decision. Lebanon has been pulled into the conflict through Hezbollah Israeli operations, border evacuations, and the unfinished business of sovereignty. The country now has a strange opening direct ambassador, level talks with Israel, a ceasefire extension, a new president after years of deadlock, and a prime minister trying to restore the idea that the Lebanese state speaks for Lebanon. On paper, that is progress. In reality, it is another countdown. The Lebanese state is being asked to solve the problem it avoided for decades, Hezbollah's weapons. Phase 1 south of the Litani created momentum. Rockets and missiles were removed. The Lebanese armed forces claimed tangible progress. But the language was careful. Tangible does not mean complete. Effective does not mean final. Israel does not trust partial language. Lebanon cannot sell a deal that looks like surrender. Hezbollah will not accept a process that ends with it being disarmed. North of the Litani. This is why the Lebanon file is dangerous. It looks like a negotiation between states, but underneath it sits the possibility of civil fracture. Israel wants security guarantees. It wants depth. It wants proof that Hezbollah cannot rebuild the southern front. Lebanon wants full withdrawal. It has to. The only way any Lebanese leader can justify engagement with Israel is sovereignty. If the deal leaves Israeli forces on Lebanese land, the entire argument collapses. So both sides are negotiating around the same word with different meanings. Security for Israel, security means control, depth, and the removal of Hezbollah's capacity for Lebanon. Security means sovereignty, return, and state authority without looking like an Israeli subcontractor. Those meanings are not easily reconciled. Meanwhile, people remain displaced. Bridges are destroyed, villages are empty. Families cannot return because the war has turned geography into leverage. South Lebanon has become a battlefield and a bargaining chip at the same time. This is why time matters there too. The longer people stay displaced, the more anger accumulates. The longer Hezbollah remains armed, the more Israel doubts Beirut. The harder Israel pushes, the more Lebanese politics may turn against compromise. The faster Beirut moves against Hezbollah, the more it risks internal violence. Lebanon is being asked to move quickly on a problem that may explode if moved too quickly. That is the kind of contradiction wars leave behind. Then there's Israel. Netanyahu promised to change the face of the Middle East in some ways. He did. Iran has been hit. Hezbollah has been damaged. Hamas has been battered. Southern Lebanon has been reshaped. Buffer zones have appeared. Israel has shown reach. But after years of war, a harsher question is being asked inside Israel. Changed into what? That is strategic fatigue, not defeat. Fatigue, a society can endure sacrifice if it believes the sacrifice leads somewhere. It can support a war if the war has a theory of closure. Israel's problem is that the military ledger and the political ledger are diverging. The military can point to enemies damaged. The public can ask why those enemies still define daily life. Hamas still exists. Hezbollah still exists. Iran still exists. The fronts have multiplied instead of disappearing. War has become not a path back to normal life, but the condition under which normal life is permanently postponed. That is why the opposition's argument is dangerous for Netanyahu. When critics say he almost changed the Middle East, the word almost does the damage. It says he has been strong enough to destroy, but not wise enough to settle. It says he can start fronts, but cannot finish them. That argument does not require Israelis to become anti-war. It only requires them to become tired of war without an ending. The coalition problem makes it worse. Israel needs soldiers. The IDF faces manpower shortages after years of multi-front strain. Reservists cannot be stretched forever. A country at war must ask who serves, who is exempt, and why. That brings the hardy draft issue to the center of politics. For decades, Israel managed the exemption as part of a delicate social bargain, but bargains built for peacetime become harder to defend under emergency conditions. When the army needs thousands more soldiers, exemptions stop being a side issue, they become a national question. Netanyahu depends on parties that cannot easily compromise on that question. So the war that was supposed to unify the country is pressing directly into the coalition deal that keeps the government alive. This is how war consumes politics. First it asks for weapons, then it asks for money, then it asks for soldiers. Then it asks the state to renegotiate who sacrifices and who gets protected by old arrangements. Put all of this together and the pattern becomes clear. Iran is under economic pressure and wants relief without nuclear surrender. America has blockade leverage, but needs that leverage to produce a deal before the costs spread. Lebanon has a chance to reclaim sovereignty, but only by confronting the armed question that could tear it apart. Israel has military achievements, but no stable political endpoint. That is why everyone is running out of time. The war has moved from ambition to constraints. Iran thought it could wait. America thought pressure would force movement. Israel thought military success would produce transformation. Lebanon hoped the Hezbollah question could be managed later. Now later has arrived, and later is expensive. This does not mean peace is inevitable. Constraints can force compromise, but they can also force escalation. A cornered government may make a deal. It may also strike out to create a new reality before the old one collapses. That is the danger of this week. Too many clocks are connected. A decision in Washington affects Tehran's storage tanks. A decision in Tehran affects oil markets. A decision in Beirut affects Israeli security planning. A decision by Hezbollah affects whether Lebanon remains a state or returns to the edge of civil war. For months, the war looked like expansion without limit, more fronts, more strikes, more threats. Now the shape of an ending is visible, not because anyone solved the conflict, but because every strategy is reaching the edge of what it can bear. Iran can resist, but not without money. America can squeeze, but not without consequences. Lebanon can claim sovereignty, but not without confronting Hezbollah. Israel can fight, but not without answering what comes after fighting. That is the new map. A map of time. The Middle East is not waiting for one final battle. It is waiting to see who admits first that the old strategy has run out.